Hey guys, this is Scott Bowling, Good Company, and you are watching Discography Discussion.
It's not a video, Scott.
I don't feel that way.
He's sticking to what he knows. This man's all about video. That might be what we're doing wrong. Like, we need to get, a video going. We tried that once.
The fat guy in the corner. They're like, what? Who's that fat guy in the corner just sitting there with all those strong opinions? That'd be the whole video. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
And if you blew them away with a 7-10 split, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe, that is Dan, and this is Scott Bowling from Good Company with Scott Bowling.
Here I am.
He's arrived. I'm so happy about this.
I'm so excited. Can't hide it.
I know I want to.
You all may remember us talking to Scott a couple weeks ago at the Nashville Rockin' Pod Expo.
Dan's way chill.
He was nothing ever excites me. It's part of the show. But no.
Risk.
Yeah, don't talk to me about Megadeth's Risk. And everybody will be good friends. We talked to Scott a couple weeks ago at the Nashville Rockin' Pod Expo. He was live in the flesh in our booth, smelling my beer breath. It was probably amazing.
You were probably smelling my hangover from the previous night. So
yeah, Toomey told me all about that. It sounded like a wild party. Me and Joe also had a wild party in our hotel room playing Mario Kart.
Nice. Did you guys have like one bed or two beds? Just asking, just throwing it out there.
2 beds, officially.
That's good.
It's okay, though. You can move them together, right?
You slid them together. Well, I was there with Eric Rogers from Stereo Mud, and me and him were watching, what were we watching? Like all these home improvement kind of shows. Not the actual show, Home Improvement, but shows about improving your home. Hungover about 7 p.m. at night, and I was like, this is the weirdest thing ever. I'm sharing a room with Eric Rogers of Stereo Mud, and we're just watching TLC kind of stuff.
You're watching Rehab Your House.
Oh yes, dude, totally. We were both like, man, you ready to go to bed? I'm ready to go to bed. It was pretty lame, but it was fun.
Well, tonight our band that we're talking about is the band Bride, who still is a seminal Christian metal band. They go pretty far back, but Scott is the super fan in the room. So Scott, tell us about Bride.
So Bride, I have an older brother who is 5 years older than me. And so he started listening to Bride, when he was about, 15, 16. I was 10 or 11. And Bride was the actual first rock band I ever saw live. So I just remember going to see them when I was a little kid and just thinking this is the coolest thing. And I've always followed them. While my brother kind of went on and moved on to other music, Bride was always a band that I always kind of kept listening to. And I didn't consistently listen to them, but they were that group that I would, if I was bored, I would pull up an old Bride album and listen to them to this day. So I love them. I haven't followed every single album they've done, but definitely their older stuff like Connect Faith and Snakes. It's just real nostalgic kind of band for me.
So when you saw them live, they still had the hair? They
still had the hair, and I think when I saw them, Dale, his solo band, Speaking to the Machine, was opening for him. And I think I still have a T-shirt from that show.
Isn't that so weird when somebody has they take their side band out as the opening act for their main band? It's like you get an entire night at Dale Thompson, whether you want it or not.
Yes. Yeah, that's true.
Reminds me of that time I saw Jade Meridian in concert, but we're not allowed to talk about that anymore.
Right. I don't even know how to follow that.
Well, before Dan figures out how to follow that, I'm going to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We are on Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, so if you have an Amazon Echo or Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening. And now Dan is going to tell you all about 5-star reviews.
We love 5-star reviews here on Discography Discussion. We don't just like them because they make us feel good, even though they do.
Definitely do.
Absolutely do. But another reason is because our world is overrun by robots. Did you know that, Joe? Our world's overrun by robots?
This sentence is false.
Well,
nobody in this room's head exploded, so we should be fine.
Okay, well, algorithms, more accurately. Facebook uses algorithms, iTunes uses algorithms, and what these algorithms do is they recommend things to you constantly, day in and day out. But they only recommend things that are highly rated. The only way for other people like you who already listen to this podcast to hear about our podcast is if you go on and leave us a rating. Leave us a 5-star rating if you love our podcast. If you don't love it, let us know. Give us whatever kind of review you think we deserve.
And now Scott is going to tell us all about Good Company.
Good Company is a show I started about 2 years ago. I had the idea. I kind of wanted to do a podcast, but I had this awesome man cave, and I had friends say, you should do a show at your house because it looks so cool. And I had a buddy who's a country artist named Kurt Thomas, does a few music videos out there, and he introduced me to a guy that filmed his videos. So I used him. I really didn't know what I was doing. The first couple episodes were really embarrassing. I then moved on to a guy named Nathan Mowry to film my show. He films Fozzy videos like Judas, Painless, Burn Me Out, along with a ton of other videos and documentaries. He's awesome. I love his crew. But anyway, they filmed the show. The show's basically kind of like your show. We kind of go through every album. Try to. You'll see in new episodes I have out with Kevin Max and Mark Lee of Third Day that doing every album is challenging, and sometimes you forget albums, and sometimes the artist points out that you forgot about the album. It's kind of awkward sometimes.
That's fun.
I was kind of wanting to know if that happens to you guys, because Kevin Max of DC Talk, he was like, hey, stop. You forgot this album. There's no props. And then he starts telling me, I give your show a 4 out of 5 because you forgot one of the props.
Ouch.
For us, it's only happened when we've had another guest that's a super fan. That happened during Meshuggah, didn't it, Dan?
Well, no, that was because I was tired and likely drunk. And we were, the band still had 2 albums to go, and I was all like,
all right, let's move on.
I was all like, yeah, which one is, I was like, so what are you guys' final thoughts on Meshuggah? And they're like, dude, there's 2 albums left. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. Well, I guess I'm going to go get another beer, and that's got to be awkward. I mean, in our case, most of the time, with very limited exception, we're usually not discussing the actual artist that we're talking to. We're not usually discussing their discography. Our whole angle is typically, let's get somebody on from a band that we like to talk about a band that they like.
That's a good idea. I like that. I got a new episode coming out in a couple of weeks with it hasn't happened yet, but it's Jose Mangan from SiriusXM, and Rich Ward and me, and we're gonna go talk about 90s metal, and we each picked out 3 albums, and we're gonna talk about each record and what it meant to us. So I'm trying to kind of change it up like that. So
that's very
I like
cool.
how you guys are doing about talking about other music. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those weird things for interviews, especially. People will typically want to do like a 50. If you go through a publicist or something, they'll want you to do like a 15 or 30-minute interview, and that's just typically not our format. But usually whenever we talk to the actual musicians that we want to talk to, like we get a hold of them directly, they're always all about it. Like they have the opportunity to just sit down like 3 dudes in a bar and talk about a band that they like. They almost always jump at it. Yes,
that's I was going to ask you. I mean, that's the frustrating part for me is that, and maybe you can help me, is reaching out to people. It's like some guys I can reach out to just Facebook, and then sometimes I have to do like a Google and find their manager and and that's such a hassle. Like it's so much easier when you just talk to them directly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know if you have any advice for that.
Well, not at this exact moment. That's still something we struggle with because it's not. There's always a wall of management that you have to go through for certain artists because these people have to be guarded because all kinds of weirdos would just be emailing them and texting them or calling them all the time. So like I understand that. I understand why they have those kind of walls built up. So it's been rough. I mean, I usually just try to get a hold of them however I can. Like at one point I even contacted a guest via their work email.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like I found out like where they worked. It sounds creepy, but it wasn't.
That is super creepy.
And it's not though. There was links to their business like on their public profiles.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, so it wasn't anything like that.
Like called them.
Hey, it's Dan. From that show. Yeah.
Oh, can I tell you a quick story, real quick? This kind of out there. Doesn't have anything to do with that, but
absolutely
talking about being creepy. This is real short.
Okay, yeah, go for
it. usually I meet the artists when they come to my house. I go upstairs and I try to make it a point to meet them and, shake their hand and talk to them, whatever, before they come downstairs, anything like that.
Right.
So I keep saying Kevin Max because I just interviewed him 2 days ago. So I go upstairs and I know he's about to get here. My wife drives a white SUV. Kevin Max pulls up in a white SUV. I think it's my wife. So I start waving to her and acting kind of silly. Hey, I'm about to start. Like, kind of giving, like, I don't know. It's hard to explain, goofiness.
Yeah.
And then as it's getting closer, I'm like, that's not my wife. That's Kevin from BC Talk. And then I kind of slowly put my arm down. I'm like, hey, what's up, man? What's up? And he rolls the window halfway down, not even all the way down, just halfway down. And I was like, dude, I'm so sorry. I thought you were my wife. What's up, man? Can we redo this? I'm Scott. So,
you're like, hey, how's it going? Now come down to my basement. Yeah.
Yeah, come down to my basement.
That's hilarious.
That's pretty funny.
We've never had anybody come live. Like, the concept of that scares me to death. Like, one time we had one time we had a guest that was like, how about I just drive up to you guys? And I'm like, I mean, Skype's a thing. It's an app on your phone, like.
But dude, listen, you gotta okay, I would be freaked out too, but you gotta put it in perspective. Like, it is like, it's almost like a party. So if an artist is coming, like if I was coming to my house at a certain time, I'll have people come over, crew setting up a couple hours before, have a few drinks, hang out, and it's like just a cool. It's like you set the atmosphere up,
Right.
So it feels really cool when they get here. It's not. You kind of kill the nerves by the time they get there. I don't know. That's what I experienced so far.
No, that's cool. I think it's just getting past the hump of like, these are just people, and I guess a lot of the times it's easier for me when I'm talking to them on the phone or on Skype to just like, it's not like they're not real people, but for some reason the nervousness doesn't exist for me when it's done through a connection like this, which is something people complain about a lot. People always say like, oh, people are losing their actual personal connections because we're doing everything digitally. But in my case, it actually staves off the nervousness quite a bit. I mean, we've talked to people, like just talking to members of my favorite bands and stuff has been really like, it's cool, but it's like when I talk to them on Skype, I don't get that weird adrenaline rush like, oh my God, I can't believe that actually happened. It's not until like Joe edits the episode and posts it that I'm like, holy shit, I just talked to, Scott from Zayo, or,
But and another thing that's weird is that when I have guests that come on the show, I cannot, like, I have to zone out, I have to take all that out because I can't think, oh man, Brian Welch from Korn is coming over in 5 minutes, because that'll psych me. Like, I just can't think like that. And it kind of, I wish I could, but I just can't psych myself out like that. So I almost had to ignore all that. And then when they leave, I can go, oh man, that really just happened. But
right. It's
this weird thing, man. So like before the interview, I'm just like, I can't build it up like that at all. Like, I just got to not think about it at all. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it totally does. I am going to steer things a little bit back on track here just because I don't want to.
Sure.
I don't know how much time you have. I've got all night. Like I said, my wife.
I got all night too.
Yeah, my wife and kids are out of town, so I could just do whatever. But anyway,
that's sweet.
You said you saw Bride whenever you were younger.
Yes.
What your first live show, right?
Yes, I saw them. I think probably Kinetic Faith, Snakes in the Playground era, around there.
So were those the first Bride albums? Like, did you buy an album at the show, or
no? My brother was big into like Christian, like 80s and whatever was going on Christian wise. He was big into Bride. Me and him would listen to all the old stuff. So, and then when around the time Connect Faith came out, he was old enough to drive. So that was like, I don't know if it was his first concerts, but it was, around the same time he was able to drive us actually to a show. So I'd say that's probably 91, 92.
Okay. Did you have any idea what you were in for?
I didn't, man. And it's kind of weird because when we saw him live, I remember, if my memory is correct, I remember Dale would be like preaching like a lot. Like he would do a few songs, and I just remember him like doing storytelling almost. And I've never really been to a concert like that since. I mean, maybe singer-songwriter kind of style, but I mean, they would put on these metal songs, these heavy songs, and then stop. And then I remember one time he was like, you can sit. I just remember everybody sitting for some reason. It was just weird. And then he would kind of preach and tell the story of something, and then they would start back up again. It was just, I've never experienced anything like it. I don't think ever since then.
Yeah, I remember seeing a lot of stuff like that because I kind of came up on Christian hardcore and a little bit of the thrash metal and stuff, so I'm kind of used to that, like with the preaching and stuff. Like, it wasn't unusual for me until I actually started going to secular concerts, and I was like, oh shit, they just play all their songs and then they leave. You know what I mean? Like, but you know, these Christian bands from this era were very much like, we're here basically for it to be a ministry, not as much like it to be about the music. Sure, like you're gonna still see some sweet solos and stuff.
It's funny because POD, if you go back and listen to POD's old live albums, old stuff, I'm trying to Snuff the Punk, like Eric, they preach too. So you're right. So that's kind of a common thing back then, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, and Dale was one of the, I don't want to say the worst, you know, but he was one of the worst offenders as far as making that a cliche. Because I remember, like, with a Bride concert, you would basically, you'd hear, like, maybe 6 songs, and then the rest of it would just be Dale preaching. And he would always do an altar call at the end, you know, like, you know, if you were to die tonight, where would you spend eternity? You know, that sort of thing. And I remember for a lot of people that actually being pretty off-putting and being a little bit like, dude, we just came here to rock out.
Yeah, it seemed like back in the day that the Bride kind of had that scare tactic. You know, in songs, like if you want to kind of get into it, there's a couple of songs, I wrote a couple of notes here about drinking, and I'm like, dude, I think he was totally against drinking. I mean, like with Whiskey Seed and a song called Under the Influence.
Right.
It's total buzzkill.
Yeah, and what's their website? What was their website for a few years? It was like Bride Bar or Bride Pub, yeah. So clearly he changed his mind on a couple of things on that.
Yeah. I wonder where he's at with that now.
I'm not sure. And it's interesting too to talk about the scare tactic of like the turn and burn kind of thing, considering the direction that he went, you know, later on in his career about like not really being so much about the hell stuff. And but those early Bride albums are, you know, like Show No Mercy was not to be confused with the popular Slayer album of the same name. Totally different lyrics on each of those. But you know, on Show No Mercy, he was very that was very turn and burn.
It was, yeah. Evil That Men Do. It's just like everything is just,
again, not to be confused with the Iron Maiden song of the same name.
Oh wow. And also like this, I think it's the second album, Live to Die. I was going to bring this up. It's funny that, you know, the second song on there is called Hell No, We Won't Go.
Yeah.
And I think it's funny that pattern with like Stryper, like the hell with the devil, and these like little phrases like hell no, we won't go. The hell with the devil. It's just funny, you know. Bands don't do that obviously anymore.
Well, I think it was their way of being edgy at the time. Because I remember stuff like Stryper, you know, it being very considered edgy whenever it was new. You know, now you look back on that stuff and you're like, this is cheesier than a cheese sandwich, you know? But at the time, for a Christian band to freely use words like hell and damn, like they didn't, you know, they'd say damn. They'd always use the words in their proper context, but always made sure that they were in there. Almost, I think, in a way to almost make kids' parents uncomfortable. You know, and then they could make it a teaching lesson where they're like, well, no, it's actually about da-da-da-da-da-da, you know, like just as kind of an attention getter, I think.
Yes, yeah. It's crazy how much times have changed since then, you know? Yeah,
especially with where stuff's at now. I mean, it's weird now, like now you hear Christian bands just say fuck and stuff, like you're like, wait, what? You know?
Yeah, like Bad Christian. Bad Christian has a podcast where I guess it's a Christian podcast, but, you know, they talk freely. And,
yeah, masturbation and drinking and yeah.
So I got in my notes. One thing I want to point out is "Thunder in the City." Do you remember that song?
Yeah, dude. They were using what do they call that? Like the talk box or something.
So I got in my notes. I heard this today and I was like, the intro sounds just like another song. And you know what song? You have to look this up later. "Thunder in the City" by Bride is almost identical to "Runaway" by Bon Jovi. It starts off, it's almost like that same keyboard. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah,
I don't know if
right.
you know that song, "Runaway." But
yeah, I do.
Bon Jovi "Runaway," it's like identical. I'm like, Yep. It's like, what's the singer of Hatebreed?
Jamie Josta?
Jamie Josta says they owe, like, Bride owes Bon Jovi a sandwich or something. Like, 'cause
Right.
it is just that same intro. Anyway, I just noticed that today.
Yeah, it's funny. I was listening to that song today whenever I was driving to I install garage doors for a living, and I was driving to a job in St. Louis, like deep in the heart of the city. So it was funny. I was driving on the highway as like the St. Louis skyline's coming up at me, and it's thunder in the city, and I remember being, like having a good time with that. And
so here's the waveform, Dan. He's right. It's the same thing.
Oh, yeah, because we play the music of the band we're talking about in the background while we're talking.
Oh, sweet. I can't hear it, but that's pretty awesome.
Joe actually just pulled up the Bon Jovi song and the Bride song, and we're looking at the waveform, and it's the same. Like, almost identical.
It's in a different key, but it's
the same.
clearly influenced.
So, and that's a thing, too, that I kind of wanted to get into also, is do you think that Christian metal bands during this time period did lack some originality?
Oh yeah, I mean, if you look back when you went to go buy one of those albums, didn't they always say, like, hey, if you like this band, you'll like this band.
Right.
I'm trying to think of bands that, if you like Bride, or if you like Guns N' Roses, you like Bride. I've seen stuff like that back in the day, and it did seem a lot of copy. Now, I'm not saying Bride copied Guns N' Roses at all. I'm just saying that I remember seeing bands and that sounded like other bands. I cannot think of any examples right now.
We had like Van Halen, and if you like Van Halen, you'll like Stryper.
Yeah, stuff like that. Like, and they were always really. Some of them were like way off. They'd be like, if you like Korn, you'll like. I don't know what's If you like Korn, you like POD, and it's like, well, it's not really the same thing,
Dan, do you like Slipknot?
Yeah.
Well, you'll love this band, Demon Hunter.
Right, yeah. So it's like they would always have like people that didn't really know anything about the music make those lists.
Barren
Cross.
Cross. I'm sorry. So I remember seeing, like, if you like Iron Maiden, you will love Barren Cross. Like, sorry.
No, you're right. I like Barren Cross, but like, are they Iron Maiden? Not really.
Right.
Or I remember the big one. The big one for the longest time was if you like Metallica, you'll love Deliverance. And it's just like, and it's funny because like they're making these albums in the 90s, like, so like they're making these charts in the 90s. So like if your favorite album by Metallica is the Black Album, that doesn't sound anything like what Deliverance was doing,
Yeah, like, who makes these rules? Like, who makes these judgments?
Probably somebody that doesn't get paid very much and works at a church,
Yeah, what's funny is, I'll say this real quick. I interviewed Sonny from POD, and he was talking about how when Limp Bizkit came out, somebody was saying, they sound a lot like Limp Bizkit, referring to POD, and he was like, dude, we came out in 92. Like,
right.
Like, you can't say we sound like Limp Bizkit.
Yeah, a little record called Snuff the Punk. Yeah. Like, it's funny. And like, going back to Bride, I think that hurt bands like Bride in the late 80s and early 90s, because I think Bride had some really cool stuff going on, on Show No Mercy, because like they were the guitar work on that record is bar none fantastic. Like the solos and stuff are so Troy, in the pocket. Yeah, like it just
he's sweet.
Yeah, it's amazing, and like that was the thing that I picked up the most going through their discography again, was just that, like, man, those first two records, Show No Mercy and Live to Die were just. Live to Die is probably the most aggressive Bride record, like with all that double bass, and like the guitars were heavier. Like it almost goes into thrash metal in places, which would have been like a huge step up as far as heaviness goes. And it just kind of blew my mind. Yeah. Because I don't remember it like that. Like I remember like, oh yeah, the old Bride albums, I'll go ahead and suffer through these. And I actually enjoyed listening to them a lot more than I remembered liking them back in the day.
What do you think of Silence is Madness? That's kind of, I think that was their third album, maybe.
So Silence is Madness was more in the vein, I think, of Show No Mercy. It was a little bit like, because it wasn't as aggressive. And I remember thinking that the first time I heard it. And keep in mind, I heard all these records years after they'd come out, But I remember I like to listen to them in order. Silence is Madness is definitely more like Show No Mercy in that it kind of focuses more on that classic 80s metal sound. And a lot of the thrash that we had gotten on Live to Die, it was essentially gone. Like they just weren't as pissed off, I guess, whenever they wrote that record. But I do think that it has a lot stronger songwriting than Show No Mercy. And I think overall, like the songcraft is a lot higher. Like that's probably one of my favorite Bride albums.
Me too. And if you notice, like it seems like Silence Is Madness is kind of, they start steering in that direction. You know, not as heavy, and kind of going to the Kinetic Faith, and you can kind of see them evolve. You know, that's kind of how I feel like how Metallica did. You know, each record kind of evolved, and the songwriting. You know, that's just how I feel about that. I think Silence Is Madness has some great stuff. I'm trying to look at it right now. Under the Influence. You remember that song?
Oh yeah.
Steer to the left as I steer to the right. My brother would always steer the steering wheel during that part.
I really liked No More Nightmares. Like that song was killer.
Oh, yeah, that's a great song.
Hot Down South was awesome.
So Hot Down South. Do you remember the? That was such an interesting song. I'm not a singer. I felt weird doing that just now, but yeah, that was a cool song.
Yeah, like this record probably had the best songs, like the most memorable songs on it. You know, because the first two records are good metal records, but like they have like a cool solo here or a cool riff here. I wasn't as big of a fan of Dale's vocals on the first two records. Not that they were bad, like they were definitely in the pocket for what they were, right? Like they were, you know, he had an exceptional voice for metal at the time.
Did you, when you were talking about the first two records, did you ever listen to, I think he was in the Matrix before Bride? Like they later released those. It sounds real old school.
Oh no, I haven't heard that.
So it's on Bride Pub, I think, but they used to be their band originally was called the Matrix. So,
interesting.
But it sounds old school like that, like you're saying. I'm trying to see if I have any of the albums. Oh yeah, I do. The Matrix Years. That's what it's called.
Yeah, I do not have that. I wonder if I can still download that from. Do you say they have it up on their website?
I bought it a long time ago on, I believe, Bride Pub.
Okay, I'll have to check it out sometime.
Yeah, it's called the Matrix Years.
Huh.
Anyway. Also, I want the from Silence Is Madness. Do you remember the intro for Silence Is Madness? It's like that creepy.
Fool Me Once at the beginning of Fool Me Once, yeah.
Oh, that's where it is. Okay. You're right. It had this guy talking to this crazy. It's like death has no silence, or like he's kind of talking at it. Just used to creep me out.
Yeah.
This whole record's got like a Motley Crue feel.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Could you imagine like someone big producing like Bob Rock or something? You know, having that full, like, what's that album? Dr. Feelgood? Like if you had a Bob Rock in there for a Bride album, it'd be huge, man.
It'd definitely be a stadium blaster for sure. You know, and especially at this time. And it was interesting on Silence Is Madness because I think it was the beginnings of Bride's transition into being more of a hard rock band and not going so much towards the metal side of it. And I think if you look at Society at that time, I mean, that one came out in 1989, so it was still mostly like metal, you know, like 80s metal.
Yeah, but like Guns N' Roses had already come out at that time, so you kind of had that kind of bluesier, not bluesier, I'm trying to, like more hard rock style. I see what you're saying. Oh,
there was definitely blues. I mean, the last song is called "Rock Those Blues Away." You know, no, I'm just being a dick. No, like right, it definitely, had kind of almost like especially on their next album, "End of the Age." Like that one basically sounded a lot like to me, it sounded like Aerosmith. You know, like it had that blues hard rock sound, and at that time, like you know, it wasn't cool after 1990 to be a hair band, essentially. You know, like it wasn't cool to sound like that, to just have, you know, some bass riffs, some pretty stock drums, and then like, you know, some cool solos here and there, like you have your shredder or whatever. Like that format was so done to death by that point.
Yeah, we can see Rat kind of going down. Like it's like Rat is not as popular as it was.
Right, it just doesn't do it.
Yeah, I totally agree.
But one of the biggest things that went down at that, you know, around that time, like 91, 92, was grunge. And that basically dominated the popular music scene, at least. I don't really know what to say about the Christian one because it seemed like there was a lot of Christian thrash metal coming out. But stuff like Kinetic Faith and even Snakes were like, basically, yeah, this is Bride. We're still relevant. We're still cool. We're playing hard rock. That was a huge breakthrough for them.
Kinetic Faith came out in 91. So, yeah, that was a huge album in 91. Did that break before Nirvana broke? I mean, or was it the exact same time?
Ooh, I don't know the answer to that.
But anyway, when Kinetic Faith came out, I just remember that being relevant, or I thought it was in my world. I thought, this is an awesome album. It seems like Kinetic Faith would have been older, but I just looked at the CD. It's a 91. That's
Kinetic
crazy.
Faith, I think, yeah, man, we're talking like a month's difference,
If it wasn't at the same time, it was in the same year. So I know Nevermind came out in September, and I can only assume Kinetic Faith would have came out in the summer.
Yeah, I wish I could get the exact month. I'll have to get back to you on that one, Scott. We'll
that's cool,
compare notes because that's a good question. And I mean, and I don't think that it sounds like Nirvana necessarily, but it has that 90s hard rock feel, where this is where a lot of the bands went, Metallica went hard rock, around this time. And it's funny listening to it in 2018 and then go back and say, well, no, this sounded really relevant. But then it was actually cool. And to have a Christian rock band that was playing this style in the early 90s, I think was really important for the genre to continue.
Yeah, and you think about like Skid Row. I mean, they put out a record around the time. I can't think of the name of it right now, but Eddie Trunk loves that album. I can't think of the name of it. And like bands like Ugly Kid Joe, so there was still kind of that rock that wasn't so grunge that was coming out around the same time.
Well, people criticize the grunge bands for basically playing, downbeat, or more simplistic rock songs, whereas bands like Aerosmith and stuff, where they were the band, and even Bon Jovi, they were playing a style where you could tell that they could really play.
Great
versus
point. Yeah,
a lot of these newer
yeah.
bands that they weren't playing complicated solos or playing anything really all that interesting musically, but it was the simplicity that people liked out of it. They didn't like the perceived excess of like the 80s metal. And so you put all that together and you get a band like Bride that puts out something like Kinetic Faith or Snakes in the Playground. And you can tell, like, wow, these guys actually really know how to play, and their music isn't super simple. But I could see how old school metal fans could view it as they've somehow dubbed down their sound.
No, that's a great point. I could have them. I love Kinetic Faith, and I love Snakes in the Playground. And my question was for you, or for you guys, is that which one would you pick if you had to do Kinetic Faith or Snakes in the Playground as being your favorite? I don't know if you guys love those two albums. I love those albums. So today I was like, if I had to pick between Kinetic Faith and Snakes, because those are such solid records for me, which one would I pick? So which one would you pick if you had to pick between the two? Just curious.
Between the two, I'll take Snakes in the Playground. I like the title, and it's got a little bit of that Motley Crue I was talking about earlier. It's dirty hard rock from the early 90s. Guns N' Roses was doing it. It was a sound that people liked, but was in the background for a few years because of grunge.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, the songs are just, it's probably one of my favorite records by them too, man. But Kinetic Faith is, I mean, if you go and just listen to them back, Kinetic Faith and Snakes, it just seems like one album to me. I mean, they're really good songs on both albums, but yeah, Snakes is definitely a classic though. I'm undecided.
I'm going to go with Snakes as well because, it was one of the first Bride albums that I'd ever heard, so there's a certain nostalgia that I associate with it. And I thought this record was really cool because I think it actually was a little bit, because this is still kind of a new sound for them on Kinetic Faith. And I think that was a little bit rough in places, not like bad, but just a little rough. Like they're kind of still easing into it. But Snakes on a Playground was like a perfection of that sound for them. Everything was kind of in the pocket. Like they did the same thing they did on Kinetic Faith, but better, in my opinion.
I think, and what's weird is like after Snakes, they had Scarecrow Messiah, and my brother likes that album. He doesn't love it. I love Scarecrow Messiah, like that album, and I feel like that's the last, for me, that was the last Bride album that I loved. And then from then on, it was kind of hit or miss for me, to be honest with you. But Scarecrow Messiah, that just kind of holds a place with me because it's like that's the last Bride album that just was killer in my mind, and I feel like it's totally underrated. Do you guys like Scarecrow Messiah?
To be honest with you, and like I know it totally goes against what you were going to say or what you said, I thought that record was like if Snakes in the Playground wasn't interesting. The songs just like they just hit me in the face and then roll down my face. Like they don't stick with me at all.
So you got to go back, like songs off the album like Beast and Murder. I mean, Murder is just such a killer track on that, man. So
it is a good song. Like, I mean, it's, like I said, I'm not listening to it thinking like, oh my God, this shit's terrible, turn it off. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not like that far with it. But, you know, like I said, I love Snakes in the Playground.
But how much pressure was it for, I wonder how much, and I think Dale wrote a book online, and he just wrote it online, you could read it on the website, and he was talking about, I don't want to get his words wrong, but he was talking about the pressure of Snakes and then into Scarecrow Messiah. So that must have been serious pressure for the band, you know. It's like you're at your peak now. What you got next, you know? So I wonder if it had anything to do with it.
Snakes was basically as close to a breakthrough success as they had.
Yes, that's at their peak. I mean, I hate to say it, that was their Black album, kind of, in my opinion.
Yeah, you could actually hear Bride songs on the radio during this time, like mainstream radio. Wow, like that's how big of a success it was for a Christian band that came out of the 80s. I can't think of anybody other than Stryper that was, you know, getting that sort of like taken seriously radio play.
I think you're right, because the only thing I ever heard was Stryper. I don't remember hearing Tourniquet ever on the radio.
Yeah, like it was definitely like this was modern enough to go on your modern rock radio at the time.
That was Guns N' Roses, and now Bride with their new record Shotgun Wedding.
Well,
that is insane, dude.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those, like, you know, situations where, yeah, of course there was a lot of pressure because, like, I didn't think anybody starting that band thought at any point that, like, we're going to have radio play, we're going to be playing these sold-out shows, we're going to be playing with, like, you know, secular bands and stuff, like, because the Christian metal scene was pretty tight-knit back then, and everybody just kind of stuck together. And I think with Scarecrow Messiah, I think it was just, they tried to do the same thing again, but the songs just, I don't personally feel like the songs were quite there. And I can understand that they probably threw out a whole bunch of really good ideas before they decided on an actual, you know, on a finalized track listing. And like I said, it's not a bad record. I don't hate it, but I definitely don't love it. It's not in my top 10 or anything like that.
Dude, you're talking just like my brother, though. My brother feels the exact same way. It's funny. We have this discussion all the time. I'm like, no, seriously, go back and listen to it. It will grow on you. So, but you know what's funny is that after Scarecrow Messiah was the time where Dale kind of started. I remember he started singing for Stryper, and he did like a show or something. Was that after Scarecrow Messiah? Do you remember? I mean, it was around 92.
Well, Scarecrow Messiah was 94.
Oh, so that was before then, right?
Yeah, I guess it would have to have been sometime between Snakes and Scarecrow.
Yes, because his book, he wrote a book online, and I read it, and it said that, you know, the 92 in LA when they had the riots, I think that was in 92, he said that he was with Stryper going over songs and stuff around the same time. So that's kind of interesting, right? So that's after Snakes in the Playground. I could have this totally wrong, but I'm just assuming after Snakes, he did a show with Stryper. I guess so. That didn't work out. Then they did Scarecrow.
Right. Yeah, they did Scarecrow, and then it gets a little weird with. There was an album.
Drop.
Yeah, Drop was the next one.
Yeah, that's not on Spotify either. It's so weird.
Yeah, there's a lot of albums in Bride's discography that you can't just find. Like we were complaining about that this week. That like some of them we just couldn't find. Like I ended up having to pull them up on YouTube. Yeah, and listen to that. And that's kind of, you kind of just have to sit there and listen to it all the way through. You know, there's no, you can't really.
One video that's 54 minutes long.
Yeah, I mean, I've got like the premium YouTube, so like I can minimize YouTube on my phone and listen to it in my headphones.
Totally.
So that makes it a little bit easier.
So talk about, you know, you said that Scarecrow Messiah was kind kind of a B-sides of, in your opinion, I'm kind of guessing that what you said, B-sides of Snakes in the Playground. How'd you feel about Drop?
Drop was weird.
Drop was super weird, yeah.
I think they listened to people that were like, because at best, Scarecrow is as good as Snakes in a Playground, although I don't think that's necessarily true, but it is very much in the same vein. And one thing that bands are terrified of doing is putting out the same album twice, unless you're Slayer, and then that's just what they do, you know.
Or AC/DC.
AC/DC has been putting out the same record for 30 years, yeah, you know, but it works for them. But you know, I think on Drop, I feel like they just went straight forward like alternative rock, which would have been like the smart thing to do in '95, because at this point, you know, we've gone like, I think grunge really got people interested in kind of the more alternative rock scene. So like, there's a lot of really weird, like, kind of, I don't want to say down tune. That's not really the right word. The guitars sound very like bluesy.
Groove metal was a thing. Pantera was a thing.
It wasn't groove metal.
People were tuning down to sound more 90s.
It wasn't like that, though. Like, it wasn't like a Pantera or anything like that. They definitely didn't return to that metal sound. They really just went further into, I don't want to say mainstream rock, but it is a far cry from being a metal record. And I would still maybe throw the hard rock label on it, but it is very different. It's much more experimental than anything they'd done before.
So let me ask you a question real fast. So you have, during that era, you have bands like Metallica doing Load and Reload. You have Megadeth doing, what did they do, Risk? It's like, and then you have Bride doing Drop. It's like all these bands are just kind of throwing out whatever's going to stick. And it seems like Metallica, it stuck, right, with Load and Reload.
Yeah.
It stuck a little more than it did for everybody else, because...
Yeah, exactly. So why didn't it... So it didn't work for Megadeth, and obviously Bride, it didn't work. I don't think it worked, you know? I don't know.
No, it's not my favorite by a long shot by them.
Oh, yeah.
I would say the difference between the two or the three, however you want to look at it, Metallica, for their ups and downs, are actually some of the best songwriters in modern music, popular music, and heavy music. They kind of made it work.
Right. So they use songwriters then, right? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying they are.
Oh, they are. Okay, yeah.
They've always contributed riffs, and then the end of the day, it's James and Lars putting the songs together. That's what they mainly have done through their career. And we've got all these defining metal songs. Load and Reload, Revisionist History, I think it was Behind the Music on VH1, where they said this was the first time we let everybody just kind of hang out and play together. But then you go back and you watch the studio videos and you realize that's not really the case. A lot of that was Bob Rock, but they were still controlling the songs. They were still arranging. They were still putting a lot of thought into it. So what I'm trying to say is they did something different and they kind of made it work. That shows how good they are. Everybody else did something different and it didn't work. There's a reason why Megadeth went back to making thrash metal.
Exactly.
And let the country music thing go.
Anthrax did something kind of weird, didn't they?
Yeah.
Euthanasia and all that.
Yeah, it was definitely a weird time. I almost wonder too, like, did all these bands have each other on like group text or something? Like, like everybody was like, we're gonna go for a hard rock sound or a more blues alternative sound.
That's funny you said that, because I heard some interview that Lars Ulrich told Dave Mustaine, you should name the album Risk, or not, maybe you should, he's kind of coaching Dave about doing a different album. I've heard that in some interviews. That's kind of fun. That just reminded me when you said that, like they're kind of coaching each other, you know?
Yeah, it makes you wonder. I mean, obviously, I don't think Bride's talking to Metallica, but like, it's definitely one of those. It's definitely one of those weird things that everybody just decided to collectively go in the same direction at the same time, and sometimes that happens organically. And I think that's really just the case. But I think really what it was is Metallica put out Load, and everybody's like, "Holy shit, how do we jump on that?" You know,
yeah.
You know, how did they do it again? How are they still doing it? You know, and it's called having really good singles in Bob Rock produced records is how you do that. But yeah, Drop. I mean, Drop is largely drivel for me. I'm trying to find something nice to say about it, but like, if I want to listen to because I listen to hard rock and metal for the aggression of it, and there just is none here. You know, there's no hard, jagged edge to it whatsoever. You know, like if your album Live to Die from 1988 is heavier sonically than your 1995 record, like that's kind of like embarrassing a little bit, you know, for a band that has a legacy like that, because you got to think of what this does to the live show. Because they're playing the old favorites, and then they start playing the new stuff, and people are like, "Well, what's this shit? You know, why would I want to hear that? Oh, never mind, he's preaching again." You know, like,
and you got to figure, exactly, and you got to figure like who are they working with at the time? Like who's investing in them? You know, they're not. I mean, what kind of studio they're recording? What kind of push do they have? You know, how they selling themselves at that time? You know, they don't have that engine like Metallica, the Bob Rock. They kind of. I don't know. It's just different. I'm trying to see who produced them at the time. Yeah, I can't tell.
I don't want to say anybody notable, and I think that's the problem. Is you have to look at reality. And in 1995, Bride is still a Christian rock band, which is still something that people aren't going to take that seriously. You know, and even the Christian metal scene had evolved quite a bit. Like in 1995. You know, Christian metal was out and Christian punk was in. You know,
totally.
And so Christian alternative music.
Like I was thinking about Supertones and all the punk was just right on the verge of at that time.
Yeah, it was just starting. There were Christian punk bands and hardcore bands and stuff, and then so you have to wonder like who Bride's audience is now. There are guys that were into 80s metal and maybe even 90s hard rock. I mean, I think there's definitely a place for your Kinetic Faith and Snakes in a Playground sound, because those records are for people that don't like grunge and they like the 80s bands, but it's not cool to like the 80s bands anymore. So I think records like that, like I was saying, had superior playing, superior songwriting, things like that. That's something that the people that hate the new trends are going to jump onto. So whenever an album like Drop comes out, you start to ask yourself, is Bride just trying to appeal to whatever's popular now? And the answer to this question is going to get a lot worse before it gets any better for the next several albums. They basically are unrecognizable from all the way from Drop until they get to This Is It.
Okay, I'm glad you just said that. Listen, This Is It. I gave up on them on the Jesus Experience when they had I am the worm running through your head. I'm like, that's not me. I'm next.
Worms can't run, Dale.
But This Is It, though. I think his son played drums on it.
Yeah.
And, I freaking love that album. This Is It. I'm like, this is one of my favorite Bride albums. This is up there. I love that record. Do you guys listen to it?
Well, yeah, they're back to Snakes. Is basically what they did. It's Snakes Part 2.
I love it.
It's very much like, hey guys, no, really, this is it. We're going back to what you like. I'm sure there's some old school fans that are like, go back to Live Is to Die, but or Live to Die. Sorry, go back to that.
Right.
But I think their Snake sound was probably their most financially viable sound.
So I don't want to skip ahead, but we forgot to talk about Bride Fistful of Bees. Did that come out before This Is It?
Oh, I didn't forget to talk about it.
That came out. So Fistful of Bees, rap rock. What was that all about?
I don't know. I don't know what I was hearing.
I'm having a vision. It was 2001. That's all.
They should be on. Listen, they should be on Roach Coach with the New Metal podcast. They should totally have Bride Fistful. They would never do that, but
I did give Lauren a whole bunch of Christian new metal CDs while we were there at the pod, but I did not throw in Fistful of Bees because I threw that record away. It is actually one of the only albums that I ever purchased, and just felt like it had such little value to me that I didn't even take it somewhere and sell it. I threw it in the trash.
It's hard to believe that Live to Die, the same guy, is in Fistful of Bees.
It's terrible. Like it is absolutely the kind of shit that makes people not take Christian music seriously.
But listen, George Lynch from Dokken and all those, he did a rap rock thing, and he called it I can't remember what he called it, but it was around the exact same time, man.
And when's the last time you listened to that album?
Never.
Right.
Barely. And it's just a sign of the times. Like when you talk about Drop, when they had the grunge thing was happening, and they're moving in a direction. New metal's happening. They have fistful of. So Bride has consistently tried to change their sound to what's relevant. Have you noticed that? I mean, it just seems like whatever's relevant, and everybody. I'm kind of skipping ahead, but you know when, like Stryper went and did their last few albums have been amazing, and they've kind of gone back to their old sound. Bride did the same thing. You know, they did Snake Eyes, so it's like nostalgia hits. It's popular right now. Bands like Stryper going back to their old sound. Bride's going to go back to their old sound. I feel that way with Fistful of Bees. It's like new metal's big, so we're going to do this, you know?
But they didn't really, though, did they? Like, Fistful of Bees is not a new metal album, but it's trying to be one, which makes it worse. Yeah. You know, like you could like if Fistful of Bees sounded like Limp Bizkit, or sounded like POD, or Linkin Park, or whatever was popular then. I think that was a little before Linkin Park, but I guess what I'm trying to say is it's trying to be something that it doesn't even know enough about the source material to know what it wants to be. Because what Fistful of Bees has is it's basically like a shitty Bride album with shitty rapping on top of it. And like the rapping is almost like the only new metal element of the entire thing. So like, kids that are into rap rock are not going to like Fistful of Bees. Like the only way you could do it right is if you had an album that actually had like down-tuned guitars, no solos, but like they're still playing those like weird alternative bluesy riffs that they think people like. They don't like them. It just doesn't sound good. It has no punch. It has no relevancy. And that's my issue with Fistful of Bees, is that it's not even good at being a shitty album, if that makes sense. Like
that should be the headline right there.
It's a strong opinion, but it's one of those things where I've spent my entire life like telling people, dude, Christian metal is actually pretty cool. There's really cool bands in Christian metal, like Stryper and Tourniquet and POD, and and then I'm like, I don't really want to say Bride. It's stuff like this that makes me, hesitate.
Is there anybody out there that would ever be like, I love Bride, Fistful of Bees?
Ladies and gentlemen, that's Scott Boland.
Changed me.
Nobody has ever said that.
That's Scott Boland.
Well, I'm like, Buddy, sent me a text earlier today. He's like, I just listened to Fistful of Bees. I don't know what the fuck I just heard. And I'm like, well,
changed my life.
Fair enough, yeah.
I'm a music lover now.
Best album ever, said no one ever.
Goosebumps, said nobody ever.
But like, I think Bride realized it too, though, right? Because This Is It drops 2 years later, and they're like, okay, guys, we're going to cut the bullshit. This is it. This is a real Bride album.
Did anybody in the band say, we should do another rap rock record, the Fistful of Bees 2,
It's whatever guy is covered in bruises, in the next band photo, It's the guy that they literally beat with sticks,
That's fun.
Well, and there's so many different people that have been in Bride. I mean, I think Dale's like the only constant, really.
Oh, Troy. Dale and Troy, right?
Dale and Troy, yeah. I'm pretty sure. For a long time, anyway.
Their drummer back in Snakes and Kinetic and probably Scarecrow, man, he was awesome. He played live in Brazil. Like, I got all the videos, and I can't think of his name right now, but I wonder what he's doing now. But I just always remember seeing their drummer back in the day. He was really good.
Well, it's weird, too, because the drums on Live to Die are the best Bride drums, because it's all double bass. It's not all double bass, but, like, it's a huge step up from Show No Mercy, and then even Silence is Madness, it's not really present as much. Like, that was just one aggressive Bride record, and they never returned to that sound. I think maybe they just didn't like it. It left a bad taste in their mouth or something. I'm not sure. And I think that's a good example, like, of how Bride has always kind of just followed the times. I mean, in 1980... I guess it was 1988, I guess, that they put out Show No Mercy, sometime around there. And then This Is It comes out, also in the 80s. So, like, it's cool to do 80s metal. And then I think they got heavier on This Is It because thrash metal was starting to become a thing. Or not This Is It, I'm sorry. on Live to Die, thrash metal's becoming a thing, you know? And then, you know, suddenly Silence is Madness is kind of still in the same style of those records. And then alternative rock becomes popular. They kind of go more alternative rock.
It's a sign. It's like Kiss doing when they say they did disco. That's just a sign of the times, right?
Right.
They've been consistently like that.
The only damage that it does, and I promise I didn't bring you on here just to talk shit on Bride, but like
I didn't. No, I understand.
You know, I think it's just one of those things. I've spent my life, you know, like I said, telling people, Christian music's actually pretty cool. I've listened to it, you know, my whole life, and you know, there's a lot of bands that have a lot of real value. But one of the biggest criticisms is that they always say Christian bands are always trying to sound like secular bands. And the sad thing about Bride is that's kind of true. Until like their most recent, like 3 albums, where you can take their latest 3 releases and say, this is Bride, this is the Bride sound, because the Snakes on a Playground in the Playground sound was original to that band, and their new material reflects that.
Okay, so like if you look at and I'll quit talking about Stryper, but if you look at Stryper was weird in the 90s too. I wasn't a fan of Stryper in the 90s. Against the Law was good, but Stryper in the 90s had their issues too. It was weird. I didn't know any of the Stryper albums in the 90s, but then they came back and did like their old school sound, and it's awesome, you know? I feel like Bride is kind of right there too, you know? It's like they kind of go back when they do their older style, it gets popular. Like This Is It was great, you know? Snake Eyes kind of gone back to their style. I don't know. I constantly compare the two.
Yeah, it's just a return to their most original sound and probably their most financially viable sound, which is what you have to focus on sometimes more than trends. I think it's easy to look at a trend and say, we got to get in on that because that's going to be the most financially viable. And that type of thinking is how you end up with a record like Fistful of Bees. You know, that's how you get there. And
the passion's there. It's like, is the passion still there, or is it just we got kids now, we have a family, we need to keep this thing going, and you know what I mean? It's different when you're younger. It's just I don't know. I think it's different the older you get.
Well, and I think it's also the music was always a ministry, so I think there was a focus on we want to bring Jesus to the kids. How do we do that? Well, we got to play the kind of music that the kids like. So in the 80s, it's metal. You know, in the 90s, it's hard rock and grunge. You know, in the late 2000s or in the early 2000s, it's rap rock or new metal. You know, and so I think their copycatting of certain styles came from a very sincere place in their minds. But I think looking at it collectively as a whole, I mean, I love bands that have very diverse discographies. I'm not as big of a fan whenever it's obvious that they're just doing what was popular at the time.
Blatantly obvious.
Hey, Dan, can you pass me that skillet?
Oh, don't talk to me about Skillet.
Skillet, dude. Yeah, I saw Skillet back when they first started, man.
Dude, I remember when they were like a techno band.
Well, I don't remember that far back.
No, they were back later on. So their first record was a preview of the Skillet episode.
So their first album had a big skillet on the cover. Right?
Yeah, I've got that one. That one was like straight grunge. Like it sounded like Nirvana. Yeah.
They played it in my hometown, like at a little place, right, 5 minutes from my house. And they're nobody back then.
Yeah. Now they're one of the biggest bands in the world. Who'd have thought?
So, what do you think about Bride after Fistful, or after This Is Us? They did Skin for Skin, and that was like a heavy, like kind of dark. I remember the drums had a lot of pretty heavy drums, and
yeah, they sold it. They sold it like it was going to be returned to the old Bride sound, like the really old.
Yes, that's what I thought. Yeah,
but it wasn't really that. It definitely was more modern heavy, which is good, right? You can't go back to the '80s metal thin guitar sound, you know. So I think they did a really good update, you know, on their more metal side. I thought that was a great record. I found that one really enjoyable, being so late in their catalog. And I mean, I thought This Is It was great too, but like this was a little bit more my style, you know.
Yeah, I liked it too. I didn't love it, but I liked it. I thought it was cool. After that, they did the new album, right? Snake Eyes, is that right? Or did they do anything between? I think they did Skin for Skin and then Snake Eyes, if I'm right. But Snake Eyes was. What do you think about Snake Eyes? With it sounded just like throwback to Snakes in the Playground.
Yeah, it sounded very similar to that, but it was like you
The
said, it was a
intro
lot darker.
Crazy.
Yeah. Overall, it was much more. Like just darker, which was very different for Bride. You know.
Are you talking about Snake Eyes being darker?
Yes.
Snake Eyes, Incorruptible came out right before that.
Well, and I was thinking Skin for Skin too. Yeah.
There's Czar Bomba in there, but I couldn't find that for the life of me.
Yeah, that one I did not hear, which I kind of regret, but I just couldn't find it. If I can't find it, I'm kind of like between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, I was glad for Skin when it came out because I was like, okay, this is cool. I like this. It got me back into. I remember when the album came out, I started listening to old Bride again, and it was like, oh yeah, Bride was actually kind of cool back in the day. So that's what Skin for Skin did to me.
Yeah, it did. It actually kind of revitalized the band for me a little bit because I was like, okay, Bride's around. They're still cool. And then I listened to, all their stuff again, and I was like, okay, well, some of it's cool. But I mean, you could say that about any band. But to answer your question, we had Czar, Bomba, and Incorruptible between Skin for Skin and Snake Eyes.
Yeah, you see, I don't even know anything about it. I don't even have the albums. So,
they were independently released, and here's the weird turn. Because a lot of people that were Bride fans back in the day don't even know that Bride's still a band. And I think part of that is because they've kind of had the Christian music scene has kind of more or less turned their back on them. Because Dale has some controversial beliefs on a few topics, which I won't get into too strongly. Yeah. But basically, he has a fundamental difference in belief about like the existence of hell, and I'm heavily paraphrasing all of this. And if Dale's listening, reach out. We'll talk.
We're down to do the interview.
We're down to do the interview. So, he can come on here and just tell us all the stuff we got wrong tonight.
If he's on your show, can you just please let me be on there? I won't even talk. I'll just hang out, just listen.
We'll make it happen.
You scratch our back, we scratch yours, Scott.
Yeah, we'll make it happen.
If you have him on your show, then we come down to Atlanta and sit in the back and just drink beer.
It's true. I've asked him to be on the show several. I've actually stalked him a little bit. Like, so you're saying there's a chance? It's like, anyway, sorry.
There's a very, very small chance that I would ever do your show. So you're telling me there's a chance?
So you're telling me there's a chance?
Love it. But yeah, so you were telling me that you have kind of an interesting history with Dale. Is there anything?
Before we get into that, I do. Well, we can get into that now, but I do want to talk about Snake Eyes before we end with anything. But
go ahead.
Yeah, I'll talk about Dale first. I kind of social media stalk Dale, which I never do. I mean, I reach out to artists and say, hey, do you want to do an interview? And if I don't hear back, then I leave them alone, or I go to managers or whatever. So a couple of late nights, I would reach out to Dale, not hear nothing a couple of times. And then finally, he replied. I don't know exactly what he said, but it was to the extent of, yeah, that would actually be cool. I think he thought my show was a podcast, and I had to explain to him, it's not a podcast. You actually have to come to Georgia. And he said, oh, that sounds good. I like that. And I don't know word for word what he said, but then he followed it with, but I live in New Zealand or something, just somewhere far away. And then that kind of ended it. I was like, well, okay. It was a good talk. Guess you're not going to be on.
Dale Thompson, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah.
Yeah, Dale Thompson. Yeah, thank you.
You could do the TED Talks thing where you just put him on a screen and you sit next to the screen and talk to it.
Dude, I would do that. Seriously. It's something personal for me. I'm like, you're the first one I saw live. That was a rock band. Gotta have you on the show. But yeah, I would totally love to have him on the show. If he ever wants to do it, if he's ever listening to this, I would love to have Dale Thompson on the show. It'd be great. And on that note, Snake Eyes. So, what do you guys think about Snake Eyes?
Where was this in 2001?
I was about to say it seems like you were saying, Daniel, about Scarecrow being the kind of like a bad, I don't know how you said it, but something about Snakes in the Playground and Scarecrow being less a B-sides version of Scarecrow. I mean of Snakes.
Yeah, it was the same sound. It was in the same vein, but the songs weren't as good.
What I'm saying is Snake Eyes, I think, sounds like Oh, this is brutal. I like Snake Eyes, but I feel like it's Snakes on the Playground's better. I just feel like it's maybe
it's a classic album. I mean, you can't compare a new album to a classic album like that. Like really, and not come away disappointed. You know,
not from an enjoyability standpoint.
But if you're talking about like I like this sound and I want to hear this same sound but with new songs, I think you're fine with something like Snake Eyes.
With Snake Eyes, like, even the intro is like the exact same intro as Snakes on the Playground. They updated a little bit, but
it's definitely a callback to Snakes on in the Playground. But like,
I've never heard of a band doing that before. I've never seen a band that says like Deftones is one of my favorite bands. White Pony was one of their biggest albums. I would never expect Deftones to say, "Hey, we're gonna make White Tiger" or something that sounds just like White Pony. You know, I've never heard of a band doing that before. You know, have you? Is there any band that's said, "Hey, this is like Rust in Peace is our best album, so we're gonna do Rust in whatever"? You know, that's strange to me. I've never heard of anything like that before.
Well, depending on how you look at it, Mortification did that.
Did they?
I can't say it or Dan will punch me.
Scribe of the Pentateuch and Scrolls of the Megaloth, except for the Scribe album sucks and the Scrolls album is awesome if you're into death metal. Yeah, I mean, I've seen other bands do it, but not in such an obvious way.
Oh, most obvious example ever, Meatloaf.
Right.
How many Bat Out of Hells are there, Meatloaf?
No.
Currently, there's 3. Good talking to you.
That would be cooler if I did Snakes Out Playground 2. that would have been cool.
The Snakes are back.
All right, well, I think it's a callback. I think other bands have done it.
Still here.
I think other bands have done it. Like Tourniquet did it for a while because another band that had kind of a weird 90s phase, you know? I mean, they were always in the 90s, but like they had like mid-90s, late 90s, they did some weird stuff. And, you know, they came back and just started playing their old sound again. Now, it wasn't like we're trying to make a record that sounds just like our, or, you know, that are named after our old record, not a direct callback.
I mean, that makes sense. I mean, like Stryper did that too. I mean, they went back to their old sound. That's what people wanted. I get that. You didn't see like, I don't know. I mean, Stryper did their own thing. I love Bride, so I'm not throwing them completely on the bus. I don't know what to say now.
I think
Scott's okay with it, is what he's saying.
Yeah, no, I think it's fine too, and I think for longtime fans, it's a cool thing.
Hot right now, don't they?
Stop drinking. That's what happens when you drink too much.
Exactly.
I think it's fine. I think it's a little ham-fisted to name it like Snake Eyes, because you're basically saying, yeah, now we're looking back at snakes. You know, like that's essentially what Snake Eyes means to me.
What would kinetic faith be? It'd be like kinetic religion or something.
Right. I don't know. I wouldn't call anything kinetic religion. But
kinetic eyes.
Kinetic eyes looking at snakes that also show no mercy.
The scarecrow kinetic eyes.
Well, you know,
physical religion.
You know, Hopes Fall actually. Hopes Fall on their new record has a song that they basically like say the track titles of like 5 or 6 Hopes Fall songs in the lyrics. So they're like, there are a lot of like cool throwback type things that bands are doing now. It seems like, especially it seems to be the case with like older bands that are coming back to their old sound, or you know they're basically just throwing a bone out to the fans. And I actually think it's pretty cool, but I do think that if you're going to do that, it's cool to have your callback, but you also want your new record to have its own identity, like from an artistic standpoint.
Yes, yeah, I totally agree.
You know, every album that you make, that you set out to make, you want it to stand on its own as an album.
Totally agree.
And I think the only dangerous thing about callbacks is sometimes it takes away from that artistically. I'm not saying it did with Bride, but I am saying that it can affect that, if that makes sense.
Well, look at like I keep going back to Metallica, but look at Metallica, Hardwire. They went kind of heavy, and they kind of go back to their old sound. Their last couple albums kind of went back to their old sound, but they had a spin to it. So we're going back to our old sound. It's not going to be, I don't know. It's not going to be Saint Anger. It's going to be back to our old style, but we have good songs, and it works, They went
basically back to the Black Album sound with a little bit of the thrash metal from before that thrown in there for good measure. I think that worked. I think that worked really well. But with Bride, I think it's worked pretty well. Like, I got to give Bride credit. Pretty much everything from This Is It on has been pretty rock solid and focused
totally.
and really focused on expanding that Snakes sound that they established. They went through their weird experimental phase, and they landed back on this sound that they were the most comfortable with. And it's not trendy necessarily. It's for Bride fans.
Exactly. You're not going to reach 20-year-olds with Snake Eyes.
Right.
Yeah, it's so I totally get that.
But I mean, they had some ups and some downs. But something that we also say on this show a lot is that just because I don't like a fistful of bees, doesn't invalidate, Live to Die or Silence's Madness or Kinetic Faith or Snakes in the Playground. Those albums still exist and they're still great. You can't replace a great album with a shitty one and then hate the band. I mean, you can if you're an idiot.
Yes.
But
dude, I totally agree with what you're saying. Yeah, because it's like, as a fan, you should, like Eddie Trunk says this, but you should be able to not like certain albums that your favorite band puts out. That's a normal thing. You shouldn't be like, I love this band, so every album I'm going to love because I love this band.
I think with Bride, it's very much the same thing. And I think the good, for the most part, outweighs the bad. Because, I mean, you've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 if you count Scarecrow. You've got 6 albums, and then you add 4. You've got almost 10 albums of really good material. And then you've only got like 3 or 4 that are kind of shitty. I think as far as a lot of bands that have this many albums go, it's pretty good.
Do you ever think they should do like a reunion show, like Sharper did The Hell with the Devil from start to finish? That would be cool if they did like Snakes from start to finish or Connect Faith.
That would be cool. The only thing I wonder is like who would show up at that concert. I kind of feel like Bride is kind of the band that's always kind of given the shaft as far as like what's been accepted with Christian music.
I agree, but you know what? Prayer Chain is a band I love. My brother and I love. 90s, they came around the same time around Pearl Jam. But what they did was they did a whole like Kickstarter thing saying, hey, we're going to play a show, one show only kind of thing in Nashville. I think they played a couple of shows. But so all their fans just kind of they gave them plenty of notice. Hey, we're going to do this one show or these 2 shows. So be there if you can. And my brother and I went to Nashville, and it was sold out, just packed full of fans. And the whole time I'm thinking, this would never happen if they just played a normal club. But everyone's here, one spot. I wonder if Bride would do that, Let's say Bride would say, we're going to do 5 shows. We're going to do here,
I think this is an era where that's going to occur. You've got enough people that are in their 40s, early 50s at the latest, and late 30s that were listening to these bands since they were kids. And the bands are still young enough that even if they're not playing together, you could pull that show together and at least pack the room. I'm thinking of Korn playing Follow the Leader in its entirety a few weeks ago, or a few days ago, whenever that happened.
I saw them when they did the first album from start to finish. It was amazing.
And as a fan, that's awesome. It's fun to go see that record that you never thought you'd get to see in its entirety.
And they played a smaller show, too, when they did that, too, which was really cool.
That's also a band that I never got to see. I never got to see Korn just play self-titled. I got to see them do Family Values, and they open with Freak on a Leash, and followed that with Twist. Figure that out. The point is, for a fan, that's the greatest thing you could possibly do. Hey, Zao, play Liberate in its entirety. That was for Dan.
They won't do it.
So, dude, I think anybody could pull it off. The internet has kind of proven that.
Yes, with Pledge and Kickstarter. I got a funny story about when you said the Korn thing. What was it on Twist? I interviewed Brian, and he said that he had a playlist of all, like, just a random playlist he was doing. It was like all these Christian songs, and he was really feeling it. And then all of a sudden they had Twist. He said it was just thrown into another Christian song, and he's like, oh, feel the Spirit. Yeah. Nappa rappa tappa. He said he started laughing. He's like, wow, that was random.
The question that I would love to ask one of them, is it true that you all have played Daddy live basically twice at this point? Because I know for a fact they played Daddy at that show.
They did it, and then they stopped. They took it. When I saw them in Atlanta, they didn't play it, so they took it out. That's a great question.
Because that was always the story. They played it once and they never played it live again. I'm wondering, is that really true?
I should have asked Brian. I can ask him. I'll send him an email. That would just be Daddy ?
How many
Tell
times?
me about Daddy. How many times? Don't give any more. Don't give any more information than that. Just
No more,
that
no
right
less.
there. Yeah.
I gotta know.
Your best friend, Scott. Yeah.
That's funny.
But to wrap this Bride conversation up, and we don't have to stop talking,
Sure.
but as far as Bride goes, we always like to get people's final thoughts on the band. Whatever you can sum up how you feel about Bride in a whole, if you can keep it under 2 hours or less.
I can probably keep it under 10 seconds or less.
Perfect.
If you want. My feelings about Bride is total. I think about my first time going to a concert. It's like I think about my brother taking me young. I always think of Connect, Faith, Snakes in the Playground, Scarecrow Messiah, and just that time in life where I didn't work, I didn't do anything. I'm just a kid, and going to these rock shows that meant so much to me. And Bride kind of shaped. I have my own show, Good Company, where I interview artists, and I love music. Bride was that band that I want to say kind of started all that. I didn't have a passion for baseball. I didn't have a passion for sports. But for my older brother taking me to these kind of cool shows, it's like I was like a little kid going, wow, that's cool. I want to play music. And I did. I bought the drums. My parents got me a drum set and music. But Bride was that band that kind of sparked that interest in and I have 2 kids, so I'm kind of like, a couple years you guys are going to start going to concerts with me because I want them to experience that, so Bride was that. It's a huge compliment to Bride. So if Dale hates me for everything I said, I hope he hears that he was the reason why I have Good Company, basically, because he was, before I could get into Guns N' Roses, Metallica, and all those bands, I was going to these Bride shows, and so Bride did that for me. So that's what I have to say.
So I think for Bride, for me, they're a band that has always been interesting to me because of they were kind of a case study in Christian rock, like how it could go. When I was younger, there was kind of this idea that Christian rock basically didn't exist before POD, and because that was they kind of ushered in the more modern era of Christian rock music. But with Bride, for those of us that actually went back, because I started with stuff like POD and ended up going back and checking out all the old stuff. And Bride was one of the first bands I heard. And I still have a cassette version of Show No Mercy. And it's almost all completely worn out now. I listened to it so many times as a kid. They were always interesting to me because of all the twists and turns. They really are a good measuring stick of all the different trends in music that have basically taken place since 1988 all the way through 2018. There's almost a Bride album to represent every shift in hard rock music during that era, and I think for that's very important. But I am really glad to see that they stuck with their sound, which was their Snakes in the Playground sound, and that is now what they are focusing on and expanding on that sound instead of just doing like a 180 and going in a totally different direction.
Bride has never been my cup of tea. When they're good, they're good. When they're not, I don't want to hear it.
What's your favorite Bride album? Just, I don't mean to cut you off.
Off the top, let me just pick one and say, and I'm not even being funny, I'm going to say Snakes in the Playground.
I was going to say, come on, it's Snakes. Everybody's favorite album is Snakes. Come on.
I think if you want to listen to Bride, listen to the good ones. And if you're a big fan after that, listen to the not good ones. You might find some stuff that you like.
Just don't listen to Fistful of Bees.
Unless you're Roach Coach, in which case, listen to
Fistful
that.
of Bees. Yeah.
Dude, that's awesome. Hey, what's funny is that, like, so I posted that, hey, I'm going to talk about Bride, but so what if the person says, who's Bride, which is a lot of people, they type up Bride and Fistful of Bees is the first thing they see and they click on it. You know what I mean? It's like, you have to be very, like, listen to Bride, but if you're going to listen to them, listen to this, and I have to encourage them to, which album to listen to.
Well, and that's pretty much the whole point of this podcast. We really try to be almost as historical as we can, which is why we go through the albums kind of in order, because
awesome.
It's kind of a good primer. And granted, if you think that my opinion sucks, you're probably right. But it is just our opinions. But at the end of the day, I think we try to just describe, to the best we can, honestly, about which albums are good, which albums are bad, which albums are the ones you should check out, which is the best, which is the worst, And I think that kind of thing is really important. Whenever we actually had Roach Coach on our podcast, we had all three of them on. Our topic
Very
of
cool.
conversation was not a band. It was actually about music criticism and journalism. And one of the conclusions that we all collectively came to is that music journalism, music criticism is important because it provides context. And I think in the modern era with your Spotify and Apple Music and stuff, a lot of people just listen to an album and they feel a certain way about it. But the way you feel about something when you hear it is based 100% on your own experience hearing that sound. And sometimes you'll hear something and be like, "Oh, this is terrible," and then you come back a few years later once you have a little bit more musical experience and you're like, "Oh, actually, this was really good."
Well, I agree with that, but lyrics have a lot to do with that too. It's like where you're at with your age, like Linkin Park, for example. Back when I was in my 20s, listening to their lyrics, it was very like, I wouldn't talk relationship wise. I was like, oh yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah, I don't need you anymore. Like they have all these like lyrics that kind of, you know what I'm saying? So like I hear what you're saying, but I feel like when you get older, it's like, the lyrics mean something different. You kind of want somebody you can relate to more,
Yeah, I definitely feel that, especially in a lot of bands I've been listening to for years. It's weird hearing it because like even Linkin Park got more complex and a little bit more mature lyrically, on their later material. And their later material wasn't the angry nu metal of the older stuff, Like I'm older too, and I'm just not as angry as I used to be. So why would we expect our favorite bands to be the same?
Exactly. Deftones have the exact same way, because I've heard Chino talk about Adrenaline being like, oh, I was this angry kind of teenager guy writing these lyrics, and now that he's older than me, his lyrics are going to change, the music's going to change. So I totally get what you're saying.
Dan, what's your album of the week?
Oh, my album of the week is Headcage by Pig Destroyer. It just came out this week.
Scott, what about you?
Okay, my album of the week is This Still Random. It is not new at all. But
cool.
My album of the week is Beastie Boys, Paul's Boutique.
Oh, nice.
Every interview I do, Paul's Boutique is like my go-to, like Paul's Boutique, play it. And it's just, I love that album, start to finish.
That is a great album. It's kind of like your pre-interview get pumped up.
Exactly. It's like a routine I have. I'm like, if I don't play this album, it's going to be a bad interview.
It's going to suck now.
Mine is Fistful of Bees. That's my go-to free.
Right.
Just kidding.
Nice.
Jeez, that's going to be rough. So you did one good rap album and one bad one. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
That's funny.
Well, I'm not allowed to say the Flash Gordon film soundtrack by Queen, even though I've been spinning that daily.
That could totally be your album of the week, dude. There's no shame.
I thought we weren't doing
That's
soundtracks
awesome.
on here.
I told you Return of the Mac. You told me Return of the Mac was okay. I'm like obsessed with that song. Have you ever heard that song, Scott?
I love that song. Actually, I have Sirius XM 90s. It's like, and they play that song all the time on there. That's a great song.
Fuck it.
I'm
Flash Gordon.
Flash Gordon, man. It's a great album from start to finish. There's no shame in that.
Oh, well, who wants to live forever? That's a great idea for a mashup, dude. We need to do Dive by Nirvana mashed up with Flash Gordon.
Great song.
That'd be cool.
Fuck yeah. Scott, where can people find good company?
So I have a website, scottgoodcompany.com. And also you can find me on Facebook with Good Company with Bowling. And you can find me on Instagram also. And Twitter too.
Everybody's on Twitter. That's what they want us to believe, right?
Right, but I never go on Twitter though, so it's, yeah. Everybody's on Twitter, but I don't post much on Twitter. How about you guys? Do you guys do Twitter?
We do Twitter, Facebook. I think the one thing we don't do right now is Instagram, but does everybody need an Instagram picture of two fat guys sitting in chairs getting ready to record a podcast?
I'll like it if you do it.
Just for you, Scott.
Thank you.
And on that note, this has been episode 82 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion, and please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks.
Give me your money.
Soon to come, Scott Bowling, ASMR, eating a sandwich.
Thank you.
Yeah, you
Can we
gotta get one
charge
of those,
$5 for that? Is that cool?
No.
Sure.
Dude, we're doing it.
That's been the hard thing for us. Like, we're so weird about putting guest content. Like, I know we're just joking about the sandwich thing, but
What
it's
makes
like-
you think I'm joking at this point?
Okay, well,
Dude, you have a great voice, man. Like, hey guys, I need to do that when I intro bands. Hey guys, you are watching Good Company. Like, I need to get that vibe from. That's
Dude,
awesome.
if you give me the copy, I'll record the voiceover for you all day long.
I got Rich Ward to do it. If you watch my episode,
Oh, yeah.
Good Company. Hey,
Well, he's way better than me.
yeah, you're good on that
man.
front.
You're pretty. You got that loud voice,
Dude, I'm that guy that listened to radio guys for years. Like, I love talk radio. My biggest podcast influence is Leo Laporte, because he was the guy that said, podcasting is cool, but this could be radio. And now everybody that's doing it well is basically doing talk radio.
Dude, you know my favorite is when I'm growing up as a kid was Casey Kasem. Do you remember him?
I've heard Casey Kasem.
Kasem. Yeah.
Dude, he knew everything about your favorite artist. Like, this is Casey Kasem. And whatever artist you like, I love Bride. This is Casey Kasem. Ride. Just released Live to Die. And he would talk. I mean, I love that dude.
It's time for a long distance dedication. Dear Casey.
Yeah, Casey Kasem. Yeah.
My wife died last year and she loved this song. Can you play this song? Yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Just for you, I'm going to play that song.
Oh, man.